What many have long feared has now finally happened. A self-driving car has claimed its first pedestrian victim, and the question on everyone's mind is, well, whose fault is it? And as a follow-up, should we just cool it with the whole self-driving car thing then? So here are the facts. A few days ago, a woman was struck by an Uber that was on self-driving mode. The company is testing self-driving vehicles on some major cities in the United States, and this was one such situation. The woman was, it was later found out, crossing outside of the crosswalk. This happened at night, and she was wearing dark clothes. At the time, we didn't know exactly a lot of the details around the circumstances of the incident, but now footage has been released, and it's clear that it doesn't seem like this lady was paying much attention. And here's the problem. This is what I'm going to get flack for. I've made comments on social media before about driving here in my city, in Calgary, Alberta, and pedestrians here have this habit, this suicidal habit of crossing the road without looking both ways, and not on the crosswalk, so not at a stop sign, just jaywalking right into traffic. And it's happened in situations where it was, I don't understand how they couldn't have seen me coming. It's almost like this person had a death wish. And of course this upsets me because, well, I would be on the hook for killing this person if I wasn't paying super close attention. And yes, if I'm driving a car, I should always be paying super close attention, but at the same time, your physical integrity, your safety, some of the burden of that is on you. Like, I know this is a very cynical way of looking at things, but my personal safety is something that I take very seriously. So I'm going to take every precaution I can to prolong my time on this earth, and that involves looking both ways when I cross the road. This is something that was taught to me when I was, what, I think 7? Anyway, back to the situation. So that's the story. The lady was run over by a self-driving vehicle. It was since found out that she was crossing outside of, it was not on a crossroad. She really didn't have the right of way, and I know that is debatable because as a pedestrian you do in theory have the right of way no matter what happens. It's the driver's responsibility to always be on the lookout for anything like that. Yeah, I get all of that, okay? I get all of that. But you know how I feel about personal responsibility, so let's just push that aside for a second. So everybody wants to know what exactly happened, and would this have been prevented if it was not a self-driving car? Now, the driver, right, use quotes because he wasn't actually driving. This is a whole little asterisk on the situation, right? Because this was found out later that the driver was actually an ex-convict, and in other circumstances this would have brought a lot of scrutiny because Uber isn't known for their best hiring practices. So if anything else had happened about this driver, specifically the fact that he is an ex-convict would have been made a lot more noise about, I think. But it seems like this is not, I mean, it's obviously not important in the context of the situation. So when I first saw the footage, I'm like, well, there you go, right? This lady. And one thing that's important to note is that this footage is not from the machine vision software, right? The car, as it's driving itself, it sees much more than we see in the visible spectrum. It has all these kinds of radars and all sorts of little gadgets that allows the car to actually see better than a human would. And as a human driver, if that footage is an indication, yeah, I think I might have hit that person too if that was me driving. Depending on the circumstances, how fast the car is driving, if you're not expecting somebody to just walk in front of the car like that, yeah, things like that happen all the time. Now, what's going to make things more complicated is that experts are now saying that the systems in the self-driving vehicle should have seen this woman crossing the road. And this is a blow to the whole concept of self-driving vehicles, or some would want to believe. My position on this is that the new technology, we're always going to have these problems with new technology. When cars first came into the scene, they were death traps, and then with time we developed technologies that make them a lot safer than they used to be when they were first introduced. I mean, think about it: crumple zones, airbags, anti-lock braking systems, hell, seat belts. Cars didn't have seat belts when they were first invented. It's like it took some time, probably should have researched this because I'd be able to say it took this many years, but I didn't. But it took some time for people to realize that if this fast-moving vehicle suddenly comes to a halt, the people inside should stay within the car and not be shot outwards like a human bullet. And that's just the thing. Self-driving cars don't have to be perfect because they won't. There's no such thing. They only have to be better than human beings. And every year, something like 35,000 people die in car wrecks. Self-driving cars, and yes, there's far fewer of those than regular cars on the road. But if you go by the metric of mile traveled, they have a much better track record than human drivers. Now, the other good thing here is that there is a moral dilemma around the idea of cars that drive themselves when it comes to these incidents, particularly situations where braking or swerving out of the way of a pedestrian that just finds himself in the middle of the path of your vehicle is impossible. So let's go back to the situation that happened here in Temple, Arizona. Let's say the car detects the woman and it knows, doing all its math, that it won't be able to swerve or brake in time. And there's a wall right next to this woman. And the car also figures out that the only way to spare this pedestrian is to slam itself into a wall, likely killing the passengers of the vehicle. So that's the problem. What's the right decision to make here? Should the car kill the pedestrian because, well, the pedestrian is in the middle of the road in conditions where he shouldn't have been, so tough luck, I guess? Or should the vehicle prioritize the safety of the pedestrian, going on the logic that a pedestrian is more likely to die in a collision than the people inside the car, and just slam itself into the nearest wall? So how do you account for this? Like, what if there's only one person in the car? So that's a 1-to-1 comparison. It's one life, the pedestrian, versus the one life of the guy who's inside the car. What if there's a whole family inside the car? Does that change the equation? Is that something, like, somebody's gonna have to program this at one point, presumably. So do you take these things into account? Do you write a line of code that says if there's this many people in the car and the car is likely to strike this many people, and if the number of people that the car would hit is smaller than the number of people inside the car, then just run over the... Like, my personal takeaway from this is that unless the government outright bans self-driving cars, this will be the future. In some 50 years from now, the idea of driving your own car will sound as ridiculous as farming your own food. It's just not something people do anymore, and most people in that generation will associate with the old times. But what do you think? Are you ready to give up control to the self-driving car? I had the opportunity to quote-unquote drive a Tesla when it was under and it's not even as advanced as this technology now is, from what I understand, but I had the opportunity to be inside a Tesla behind the wheel when the vehicle is driving itself, and I gotta say, it's equal parts exciting and terrifying to be in a vehicle moving that fast that you have, well, you have some control. If you want to, you can regain control of the vehicle, but for that moment while the car was zipping around and changing lanes and doing all these things, I wasn't doing anything to the vehicle, and it was exciting and scary. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Are you, because whenever I say this, that I don't care for driving all that much, and I'm okay with when the day comes that we don't drive our own cars, and I get a lot of pushback from my friends who are gearheads, people who just really enjoy driving, and they don't seem to be on board on this. So I'm actually curious what the split's gonna be here. If you guys are car people who will never relinquish control of your vehicles, or if you're like me, doesn't care that much and would like to be driven to work instead of driving there yourself. What do you think? As always, comments down below. If you're new here, consider subscribing to the channel. I put out about 2 videos a week. Leave a like, and don't forget to hit the little notification bell, because as we all know, YouTube sucks at letting you know that I put a new video out. That's all the time I have for today. I'll see you guys next time.